Good morning, everybody. I apologise, we had a few little technical issues this morning, so we had a slight late start. I know some of you are still feeding in as we kick off our second week of the P.o.P Power of Print webinar series. Last week I got so excited I forgot to tell you all who I am. I am Kelly Northwood, Chief Executive Officer of the Visual Media Association. VMA, everyone's an acronym these days, is the peak industry body looking after, advocating and assisting the paper, print, packaging, mail, publishing and distribution industry sector. We are an $18.9 billion industry with great contribution to the economy. We employ over 229,000 Australians across the country. It's a nice little stat that sometimes I think across our industry we forget the sheer size of who we are. We're a very tight industry and we all look after each other when times are tough across floods and different experiences. But we're also a really large industry and we've got a lot to be very proud of in that regard. The P.o.P, a webinar series, is just about that, about empowering each and every one of you. Over 92% of our industry are small businesses. And so having opportunities like the webinar series from the P.o.P, Power of Print Summit, where we have each week business tools, insights, things that we don't necessarily focus on in our day-to-day roles, are really important. And I couldn't be prouder that we're able to bring this to you. It's our fourth year bringing this series to you. But we couldn't do it without our sponsors, and certainly I need to call both of those out. Ricoh is a very proud industry partner. They do more than sponsor a lot of the VMA activities. They are a true partner contributing to the annual industry metrics report, the Power of Print Summit, and they have done for a couple of years now, and they continue their support to the entire team, Mark Morrow, Henrik, Lisa, Tina, Yasu, all of that Ricoh team are right behind our industry excelling and they want to be a part of it. So I thank Ricoh and the team for their support. Media Super also have been an ongoing supporter of the industry. They are our industry super fund and we're lucky to have that support. Superannuation financial management, particularly as a woman, we do have a bit of a gap there and we need to work a bit harder across how we can empower women, as well as also make sure all of the men across our industry, we are all focusing on the future, and Media Super stand well beside us in those initiatives. We're here today though in week 2 to talk about mental wellbeing, and I'll introduce and hand over to our speaker, Stephen Gamble, no stranger to the industry. Stephen Gamble, I've introduced him in the past as being a really wonderful human, and I stand by that today in this introduction. I've had the real benefit of knowing Steve's sheer brilliance. We talked about it earlier just before we're getting ready for this morning. Perseverance, dedication, and his response is, well, if you're passionate about it, it's what gets you out of bed in the morning. And everything he talks around mental health, mental well-being, and the importance of mental health is just as important as physical health. And I have stood on a stage with him and shouted out something along those lines. He's inspired me and he's inspired many of us across the industry. But most importantly, during COVID and different times where we've been a bit more challenged, Steve's not even hesitated in stepping up and saying, hey, let's do something. Let's help out. Let's reach out. And this is why this is such an important topic. It doesn't have to be whether you are an employer of many, or a manager, or even somebody who doesn't even have anyone reporting to. We all in our universe, in our world, have people around us everywhere. And often, if you see somebody who's got a bad back, you say, we should go and see a chiropractor. Or if you've got someone who's got a bad cold, we have a much more natural conversation around physical health. And sometimes our natural fluency across mental health isn't quite as readily available to us. And that's what I love about Steve's work. He's helping us with our fluency and literacy across discussing what's just as important, mental health, as physical health. Today, he's going to be talking about burnout, the signs and symptoms and steps that can be taken to prevent and to help and support, as I say, everyone in our universe and in our communities, not just necessarily within our businesses. It is important in our businesses as we look more into positive duties and things like this, that yes, there's legislation around some of this stuff, but there's also so much beyond legislation, and Steve's a really good ambassador of helping us navigate that. So without further ado, I hand over to Mr. Stephen Gamble, who I'm sure will enlighten us all this morning.
Thank you, Kelly. It's such an honour to be here today with VMA and the multiple industries that you represent. As someone who's passionate about print and as a printer by trade and a former national sales manager at Botcher, I still get confused that I'm not in the industry anymore, but I tell people that I'm a printer by trade, and I'm still really passionate about supporting the industry. As you'll see here, we've had a bit of a rebrand since I was last with the industry. We're now Anchor Health Group. Man, Anchor's still around working in the community, but what we've done is rebranded so that we can be a little bit more inclusive, or show that we're more inclusive and working with everyone. Our youngest participant is around 10 years old, and our most senior participant, it's a bit of a guess, but I'd say in their late 90s. We work with 50% males and 50% females. And we've now provided mental health education to around 70,000 people. 80% of those people have been fully funded because of our non-for-profit partners and also the support of our corporate partners. And we're fortunate to have many corporate partners that work with us within the industry, providing mental health education and literacy programs. Today, what we're going to do is have a bit of a snapshot of what does mental health look like post-COVID in our community, in our workplaces, but we're also going to talk about burnout and psychological safety, as Kelly told us before. But I think what's really important that we do, first of all, is acknowledge traditional owners on the land of which we meet, leaders past, present and emerging. And then we also acknowledge anyone in the room that has had their own lived experience with mental illness, anyone that has supported a friend, family member or work colleague through a mental health crisis or mental illness, and anyone that has been touched by suicide. For whatever reason, if you feel overwhelmed by any of the content that we should talk about today, please reach out to your employee assistance program or alternatively Lifeline, or feel free to reach out to me if you would like a chat. At the end of the presentation, I'll put up some of my details. But to start off, I think it's really important that we remember what a mental health problem is or a mental health challenge is. Each of us on this call and in our world and in our workplaces live upon this continuum or this spectrum, and we all float up and down this spectrum every day. Small things make us head towards that red end of the continuum, while other things bring us back to that health side. What's really important to remember is that our mental health and our physical health live upon this continuum together. They support each other. It's a holistic approach to our overall health. If we've got really great physical health, but our mental health needs a little bit of support, our good physical health can help pick us up and help us on that journey to wellness. If we've got great mental health but poor physical health, our good physical health, mental health can help pick us up and help us along that journey to wellness. Now, they don't solve each other, they don't cancel each other out, but what they do is they work together and help us on that journey to recover and to overcome any challenges in life. But what is a mental health problem? Well, basically, a mental health problem is when we start to notice subtle changes in our thoughts, our feelings, our physical well-being, and our behaviours that impact the way that we live our life. When we find that day-to-day things are becoming more difficult to do, like connect with friends, family, and work colleagues. When we find that we can't find joy and pleasure in the things that we normally find joy and pleasure in, or we start to notice that the hope that we have in our world is starting to dissipate a little bit. You know, when we look at the stats around mental health and really around mental health post-COVID, you know, believe it or not, we didn't see a dramatic shift. 1 in 5 Australians will face a challenge with their mental health over a 12-month period between the ages of 16 and 85. We only saw a 1% shift overall across the country. What we did see around anxiety and depression was anxiety lifted about 2% to about 17.5% of all Australians aged between the ages of 16 and 85 experiencing anxiety over a 12-month period. And when we look at depression, once again, it was about a 2% increase from around 6% up to about 8%. So, you know, after the trauma that we've all been through with COVID, we didn't see a huge jump. I'm of the opinion that the stats might be a little bit out of whack from the work that I do in the community and workplaces each day across the country, but still not a huge jump. But I also think that a really big positive that came from COVID and that was implemented in a lot of businesses was the conversation around mental health, which was giving individuals tools and avenues to be able to talk about mental health. And I think that was really, really important and none better than the printing industry. We've come such a long way with a number of different topics, including environment, inclusion, and mental health. And I think we should be really, really proud of that. When we look at help seeking, well, we saw a 10% increase over the last 2 years, up to 50%. I remember when I first started my mental health journey back in 2017, help seeking was around 25%. So we've come a long, long way. What does this mean? We've still got a long way to go, but unfortunately, what we've seen is that the supports around help seeking hasn't increased at the same rate. And one of the big problems around getting support is the availability of services and clinical supports. At the moment in metro areas, we're waiting about 6 months on average for support from either a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And if we're thinking about our regional team members out there, we're looking anywhere between 6 to 12 months, which is a huge problem, a really big problem, especially when we've got the courage to be able to reach out and get support. But one thing I have seen in my travels across the country is that I'm really starting to see those unhelpful attitudes around stigma really starting to disappear. We're understanding that our health is a holistic thing, both our physical and mental, and that it works together and supports each other. And the conversation is really starting to shift that way, which I think is wonderful. But what we're also seeing is the conversation around suicide starting to shift as well. And from young people and adults, we're becoming more open to be able to talk about suicide in a really transparent way, which provides hope and connection, which are the two underlying factors that can really support someone in times of crisis around suicide. In 2021 and 2022, we saw a subtle increase in the number of people that we lost to suicide. We don't have the 2003 figures yet, but all the baseline data that we are receiving so far is that we may see a reduction in suicide, which I think is really, really wonderful. On average, we have about 65,000 people attempting suicide across the country, which is way too high still. But the more that we talk about it, the more we create opportunity and permission to talk about suicide, the more people will start to reach out and get help. But, still, we need to understand the core around help seeking, the core around looking after our mental and emotional and social health. It's around prevention, early intervention and treatment. The sooner that we can implement preventative measures into our world means that we can support our overall health. Early intervention means that we nip it in the bud early, we get the help we need, mitigating risk, reducing the opportunity of us floating down that illness side of that health spectrum. And treatment. There's a lot of treatment out there, and then there's the treatment portfolio around mental health is really starting to shift as we think more broadly about different things that we can do for our mental health. But just like our physical health, prevention, early intervention and treatment is the key. You think about it. I'm not much of a runner, but if I was and I had a bad hamstring and I kept running on that hamstring, what would happen? The injury would only increase, the severity would increase, my time in treatment would increase. And the risk factors around me doing that injury would increase. So early intervention is really the key. We need to get in early because our mental health and physical health live together. They support each other, and prevention and early intervention work the same way. One thing that's really important to understand is that when we think about our mental health, we have mental illnesses, and one thing that is for sure, mental illnesses are very impactful. They come in all shapes and sizes. But then we have those risk factors around our mental health. And one thing that's becoming more and more of an issue within our community is burnout. Now, burnout is something that impacts an individual from work-related stressors. And the World Health Organization has a definition of burnout as being a syndrome conceptualized as a result from chronic workplace stress that has not been successful in management, and has 3 criteria of being able to define burnout. Now, in this saying it's a workplace issue, you know, I'm of the opinion that it can happen to anyone. Burnout, you might be in unpaid work, you might be a carer, you might be a stay-at-home parent. Burnout, in my opinion, can impact anyone, both either in the workplace or from a caregiving role. When we look at what stress is, it's one that's a part of all of our lives, okay? Stress is a normal part of our life. The stress of not getting into work early enough, getting the kids ready for school, stress that helps lift us. And the stress that helps lift us is that positive stress, and that's called eustress. And eustress is really empowering at different times for us, but what it can also do is be, it can become something that carries weight if we don't unpack stressors in our world. You know, 1 or 2 stresses is fine. We can walk through life. 3 or 4, it slowly starts to weigh us down. But 5 or 6 stressors in our world really starts to remove capacity from both our home life and our workplace life. If we do not address the stressors in our world, it really can turn into stress. Well, where stress is, distress, where stress is not having the tools physically to cope with the pressures of life. Distress is when we start to notice both emotional and physical issues starting to rise. If we don't unpack this is where crisis really starts to involve. And a crisis can be anything to anyone. It can be you know, I think about my 4-year-old son, Billy, you know, stressed, a crisis to him might not be getting his toast cut the right way or not being able to find his favourite toy. Where this morning, a crisis for me was not being able to get my GHD out and be able to straighten my hair for you all today. You know, they might seem silly to individuals, but a crisis is a crisis regardless of what it is. If it doesn't register on your crisis scale, it's still a crisis to someone. We have the big end of town crises where we might have loss of a loved one, we might have thoughts of suicide, we might have illness, but then we have those lower ends. And as leaders within our industry, we need to really remember that a crisis, regardless of where it sits on your crisis scale, if it's a crisis to someone, we need to lean into it. Now, where does burnout sit? Well, burnout kind of sits in that distress towards crisis area, okay? But, you know, what are the facts around crisis? You know, crisis isn't a medical condition. It is not a medical mental illness. But I have the opinion that in the future, they will start to classify burnout as its own mental health and medical condition. In Australia, 61% of Australian workers report experiencing burnout. Now, compared to 48%, which is the global average, we're really, really high. Burnout is attributed to 40% of resignations within the workplace. And like all industries at the moment, retention of staff is a really big issue. We want to have the best people in our industry, so we need to be able to support them. The understanding around stress-related absenteeism and burnout costs Australia about $14 billion a year. Now, so if we can implement changes into our own world, but also implement organisational changes, it can really start to shift where that dollar sits, because I think we all need to keep that bottom line intact. When we look at gender, women are reported at feeling a higher rate of burnout compared to males, around 62 to 57%. But an interesting fact is that historically and still, women have a better way of dealing with burnout than males do, because they're able to help seek a lot earlier. They're able to put a more positive spin and implement adaptive coping measures, while historically men have started to lean on maladaptive coping mechanisms and coping strategies to support the well-being while feeling burnt out. Burnout with employees is a big problem because we are a manufacturing industry. Well, a number of our businesses are manufacturing, but also when we think about workplace hazards as well, we've got staff on the road doing deliveries, customer calls. With burnout, employees become a lot less aware of their surroundings, but also become complacent around normal work health and safety measures, and that increased risks for our workplace and our team members. Now, the symptoms around burnout look really, really different for everyone, okay? And they look a lot like the symptoms that we find when we think about anxiety, depression, or substance misuse, the three most common mental health problems that we face as Australians. The behaviour starts to shift. We start to notice people being withdrawn, lack of concentration. Some might start using more alcohol and drugs as a maladaptive coping mechanism. Procrastination, reduced concentration with family, reduced ability to cope with conflict in the workplace, conflict with team, and reduced enthusiasm about the work. Then we start to notice the feelings overwhelmed, guilty, irritable, low in confidence, unhappy, indecisive, miserable or disappointed, that hopelessness and worthlessness. And then the physical signs and symptoms that start to creep in. And they're the ones that we usually find start to really drag us out and becomes more apparent that we might be facing a challenge with our health and potentially either burnout or mental health. And that's the run down, the sick and tired all the time, the headache, the muscle pain, sleeping more, sleeping less, or significant change in appetite. Now, I'll be brutally honest and transparent here. In July of last year, I experienced my own episode of burnout, and it was life-changing for me. Believe it or not, the kids call me Mental Health Santa. Every year I facilitate to on average 15 to 16,000 people. And for some reason, I stopped looking after me and I didn't become aware of the signs and symptoms till it was too late. And my whole world shut down, literally shut down. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. So we need to be vulnerable. We need to be able to identify these subtle changes early and implement adaptive coping mechanisms and communication to be able to overcome either burnout or facing a mental illness. Well, what can we do in preventative measures? Well, believe it or not, preventative measures are really similar to our mental health. And number one is communication. If we can talk to our friends and our family about how we're coping in life, we can talk to our workplace, and we have open and transparent conversations about health in general. What it does, it creates pathways for support to be given from either a family or a workplace point of view. But also what it does, it creates an opportunity where we can reach out and get that help. Setting clear and defined boundaries, both within the workplace and for ourselves, is really important. Exercise is unbelievably important as well. Being able to create a space to be able to reduce that cortisol in our body, but increase the serotonin, the endorphins, in our body through doing exercise. You don't need to run from here to Melbourne. I'm in Sydney, so it's about just getting the body moving. 20 minutes exercise a day can really increase the shift around our energy levels. It can shift our mood, but also it creates that space where we're doing something for us, and that's really, really valuable. Diet has a massive part to do with our mental health. In our body, we create a lot of wonderful hormones that supports our overall well-being, but in our stomach, 89% of the serotonin we create comes from our gut. If we're not eating a good, healthy, balanced diet, we don't give our body the right measure to be able to create serotonin to support both our mental fitness and our physical fitness. But also dopamine comes from our gut as well. Dopamine is something that we all chase. And if we're not eating a good, healthy, balanced diet, we're really hampering and limiting the amount of dopamine we can create in our body as well. Sleep would be the second most important thing. When you're burnt out or you're stressed out, sleep is one of those things that often heads to the left, where we need it to be right in front of us. We need it to be absolutely a key to supporting our overall mental health. I think it's the second most important thing that we can do. Our brain is a lot like a phone, okay? Each night your phone does updates. It updates software. Each night our brain does updates. We upload the things that we've learned during the day, and then our brain does all its growth. Our body and our brain does all its growth and forming while we're sleeping. And if we're not giving ourselves enough sleep or good quality sleep, we're not allowing our body to do that upload and growth. So I want you all to make sleep a priority. If you're getting broken sleep during the evening, it's like your brain is doing that kind of buffer. Nobody likes when we're waiting for a film or information to upload and we get into that buffer zone. We need to give our brain the best opportunity to upload and growth. And then mindfulness. Now, you might be looking at me going, God, Steve looks like a hippie these days. You know, mindfulness comes in so many different forms. There's the core things like breath work, meditation, journaling, gratitude lists, ice baths. But, you know, mindfulness is a part of all of our days and we just might not recognize it. Picking up a book, listening to music, going for a walk. Each of these things are really core tools that can support our overall well-being. But I want you to find that thing, because what mindfulness gives us is that space to be able to stop, empty the head and create space to be in the here and now. And if we can all find that, that is really, really valuable. There's free apps that you can download, Calm and Headspace, that can help you with guided meditations. If you've never tried mindfulness, I really want you to give it a crack, because what it does, it gives you a new tool that you can lean on in times of stress, distress, or crisis. But it's a wonderful way to start the day and reset, okay? When we think about early intervention, identifying those signs of burnout or changes in your mental health is the most important thing that you can do. There's nothing more important. Being able to get in early, get those supports early, can really shift where you sit on that health bar, and it can mitigate risk of you sliding further down the health bar, but it can really implement change to us and create opportunity where we can get the help that we need earlier. Reaching out to get help. We're human. We all need help sometimes. Having people in our world that we can reach out to is really important. I'm going to give you some homework. I want you to write down 3 people that you feel that you could reach out for support. Okay, 3 people. I want you to think of 2 people outside the workplace and 1 person within the workplace. If you don't have those 3 people, I want you to work on building relationships where you give permission for the people in your world to be able to reach out to you, but then you can give permission that you can reach out to them. Reaching out to give support, there's nothing cooler in the world to be there for others. That's why I'm blessed to do the work that I do and support the community and workplaces. You don't need to be a doctor or a psychologist, because it's not your job to fix the person's problems. Okay, it's your job to be able to be there and support. You need to replace your fixed mindset with support, especially when we're talking about emotional and social health. Okay, bring it back to support. If you're having a fixed mindset, all you do is load yourself up with a hell of a lot of pressures. But if we can be there to support, listen, and help guide someone to appropriate help, man, we've created real change in their world. And seeking clinical support. It happens, you know. We don't hesitate, as Kelly said, to reach out to a GP, a physio, or a chiro. But if we think about a physio and a chiro, in that 40-minute or 1-hour consult, they don't solve all your problems in life. They don't fix that bad back or that bad hamstring. But what they do is they sit with you, they acknowledge the problems that you may be facing in your life, both either from a physical point of view or a health point of view. And then they give you tools and strategies to take home and practice. And that's exactly what it's like when you reach out to either a doctor, a psychologist, or a counsellor. They help you build the tools to be able to go out and thrive. It's really important. We need to remove that stigma. The couch is gone. It's a health coach. That's how we need to view it. When we look at the supports out there, yeah, for sure, we have counsellors. Counsellors work really well. They stand side by side you, especially when we're working through burnout. They can help you find and implement tools to overcome the problem in life that you're facing with burnout. As a treatment and support mechanism, it has to have workplace consultation. You need to be able to talk to your direct report about any of the barriers or boundaries that have been shifted in your world, and you need to work out reasonable adjustments to support your journey to wellness at that time and implement change for the future. You know, in some cases, not all cases with burnout, because burnout looks completely different for everyone. In some cases, you may need medical treatment, but psychological treatment is definitely something that can help, and maybe 1 or 2 catch-ups with a counsellor or a psychologist just to get some purpose back into your world and set a plan of recovery. Complementary stuff, there's all those kind of life hacks that we spoke about before in prevention, but you need to be strong enough to implement them. And then having a healthy workplace, having good people around you and connections is also really important. But that leads to the conversation around psychological safety within the workplace. And psychological safety is defined as a person's ability to feel that they won't be shut down, punished, or humiliated by speaking out with ideas, questions, concerns, or for mistakes within the workplace. And it's anything that can impact an individual's wellbeing, emotional, social wellbeing, and mental health. In April of 2023, legislation was put forth by the federal government and mandated that employees have an obligation to manage psychosocial hazards within the workplace, and it falls under Work Health and Safety Acts. Each state has their own guidelines around psychological safety, so it's really important that you check out wherever you're coming from. But it really puts up the question, you know, what does this mean for our organisation? Well, there's a lot of changes and there's a lot of risk factors around psychological hazards, and for sure some of you are going right now, look at these are just a normal part of everyday workplaces. But you know, some of us have really healthy workplaces, but some of us really need to view and implement change. As an organisation, we've just put together a white paper of risks and an assessment rollout for small to medium-sized businesses. If you're interested, I'd be happy for you to get in contact with me. But when we look at the bottom view, you know, this is something that we really need to address. It's never okay to have issues around violence or aggression, bullying, harassment, or conflict. How do we implement change? It's really a 5-step approach. It's about acknowledging the state of the workplace and then implementing different transitions that can support overall wellbeing. The key of it really is about open, inclusive, and really transparent communication. It's about upskilling our leaders to be supportive, reframing the way that they may reprimand staff, giving pathways for staff to be able to reach out for support. But it's also really about allowing the whole team in the organisation to know that they're a part of psychological safety as a workplace. Just like work health and safety, when we think from a physical point of view, everyone plays a role in maintaining a safe and healthy workplace. And with psychological safety is absolutely no different. Every one of the team members, from the CEO all the way down, has a role to play. And it's about upskilling, educating, and allowing everyone to be part of that transition and growth, and removing those psychosocial hazards. There's always support out there, my friends. You're never alone. You're never alone. We have Lifeline that's always there. You don't need to be in crisis or having thoughts of suicide to call Lifeline. If you need to start that conversation that you want to have with a colleague or a leader within your business, give them a call. It's there. That's what it's there for. We have a number of different supports out there, and you'll have these in the notes. One thing that's for sure, our mental health never changes. When it comes to the little things that we can do to support our overall mental health, and we all are growing. Change is the only constant in our world, so there's always things that we can do to support ourselves, but making sure we're able to talk about our mental health, understanding those signs and symptoms, seeking help if you need it. You're never alone, okay? You're never alone. There'll always be someone there to give support. What's new for us? It's not a sales pitch, it's just a bit of an update. But as you know, we've updated our branding to Anchor Health. Anchor's still around, and we're going to transition that into something a little bit different in the future, but it's still there. But as of the 1st of April, we're launching a telehealth counselling service to support the community and a bespoke employee assistance program to support the psychological and emotional health of small to medium-sized businesses. The reason that we've done this is because, we want to continue to go out and fund community and school workshops so we can reduce suicide. And 50% of all the profits of our telehealth and EAP scheme will go back into community programs across Australia to lift literacy and reduce suicide. If you're interested, we have programs and plans for all different size businesses with all different budgets. I want to thank you all for having me today. It's been an absolute honour and privilege to be part of the printing industry for the last 25, 30 years, and it's still a privilege to be the unofficial mental health ambassador for the industry, and I'm very honoured to be part of the VMA team.
Thank you, Stephen. I love it every time. I sort of get lost in when you do your talks, because I start switching in and out of being Kelly sitting here from VMA and then Kelly being a human. And I think that's what you convey is this isn't just locked into our businesses and then we just go home and forget about all these things. These things are all part of us, and I love your passion. Thank you for sharing all of that. We've got some questions. Before I go on, I just do want to call out, Steve mentioned it. There is a lot of support around us, but if you do anything today that we're talking about, Lifeline's really terrific. They've got a great 131114, or of course Stephen at anchorhealth.com.au very generously also said please reach out if you need. I have had the great honour of having a lot of people across our industry at times be vulnerable, and I also extend that invitation if you feel that I can have a good ear or support. We're all here to share our journey, so just mindful of that again before we start to go into Q&A. Couple of things. One of the things mentioned about the app, there's another really great one called Smiling Mind, and it goes from 30 seconds to a minute to a couple of minutes, and I actually do it on the plane at the old 6 a.m. red eye to Sydney at times. And that sort of mindfulness, I think, is something that I was a bit in the camp of, well, that's not me, but I really find those apps are really great. Are there a few others? I mean, can it be as quick as a few minutes, Steve? Does it have to be an hour? You sort of...
It can be 10 breaths. It can be 10 breaths to be able to bring you back to the here and now. Box breathing is the most simple one. Before I go on stage and before I walk into a room full of 10-year-olds, I always do a little bit of box breathing. It's where we breathe in for 3 seconds, we hold that breath for 4 seconds, and then we exhale for 3 seconds. And if we can do that 10 times, what happens is our lungs send a message to our brain that, hey, we're calm, we've got control. And what happens is we've got a little part of our brain where our impulsive brain, our limbic brain, or they call it the caveman brain or the cave person brain, let's be inclusive. And what that does is it empowers our prefrontal cortex. It sends a message back to that caveman brain to say, hey, we've got this. That then sends a message across our whole body to be able to take that step, chill and reset. And it is really, really powerful. And that takes like 40 seconds.
Yeah, I think some of the part of the breaking down the stigma is also breaking down some of these definitions that we've got. Mindfulness must mean this, or an hour of meditation. Mindfulness, as you just said, can be 10 breaths. Couple of questions here I've got sent in. How can managers or organisations support employees who are experiencing burnout? Sounds like that somebody's made perhaps the right, pointed it out, so communicated, but then how can we provide that support?
Yeah, it's about consultation. It's about consultation. It's about being transparent, being empathetic, and hearing the person's pain points in life and creating reasonable adjustments for that person for that point of time. But it's really important that we set check-in times as well around, let's come back and check in a week or 2 weeks' time to see how you're going, because that works in a positive way for both the employer and the employee to really measure what needs it to be the next step. If you have an EAP and you're a leader within the organisation, you need to understand how the EAP works so you can refer on. If you can understand how the EAP works, you can remove some of the fear about your staff member engaging with it.
And do you think that there are things that are industry specific for us? You've been in our industry, you've seen sort of client supplier side. I know we're all different and unique businesses. Have you seen things that we should just be a little bit more cognizant of, or any tips in that regard for us specifically?
We're such a diverse group of businesses, from administration to manufacturing to dispatch and sales. But I think the biggest thing that we need to do is have regular check-ins with our team. That's the most important. What's working, what's not working? What could we do better? What are you seeing? And especially both around the operational and the wellbeing side. And if staff members are being part of that, then they feel like there's ownership in there, and it takes it out the guessing game for leaders, and you can nip any problems in the bud early before they should arise.
A question's come in on my phone, which I think is a bit interesting, because you did mention there's some differences with gender sometimes, and not everything's a fixed formula. I recognise that, but just some of the statistics around different women, male coping. The question I've got in, and this is something we're talking a lot with our emerging talent and supporting the next generation, is having these conversations with older employees as opposed to younger employees. The question is, they're finding it's quite a different conversation. Are there any tips for both of those cohorts that you can recommend? I think that's quite an interesting point, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Actually, the back end of last year, I don't know how it came about, but I got called into a number of different workplaces to talk about a number of different topics, to be able to upskill around mental health with some of the more mature team members, but also to talk about transition from workplace to retirement. And it's about having an opportunity to sit one-on-one with a person and explain where we are now with our understanding, and that we need to be on board with it. Old school thought around mental health is just toughen up, but that's not the case anymore. People say, well, mental illness was never around when I was young, but the case is that it was masked in so many different ways by people that threw everything into work, the people that had substance use disorders, DV, domestic violence. There were so many different ways that it manifests itself, but it's about having one-on-one consultation and bringing that person on board, but also having inclusive conversations about mental health. And if you've got younger team members working with more senior team members, you'll see those little light bulb moments go, especially around those conversations around mental health. It's a journey, and it's as we grow and we learn more about well-being and social and emotional health, people have to come on board, because if they don't support themselves, they're not going to be around to support the people that they care about. And the old hardheads around mental health always want to be around for the people in their world. So they're going to have to change.
I think it's interesting you talked about earlier in the beginning, you know, crisis, you know, can be different things for all different people, or being overwhelmed is different things for all different people, and old, young, male, female. It's not about necessarily fixing everything. I remember working with you a couple of years back, and it's not about asking questions to fix things. It's about you know, listening and then helping and assisting, and how you can help them with their next sort of steps and things like that. I think we can sit here all day. I've got a few more coming in, but I'm mindful of time, so we will write them up. I know there's been some technical issues. There was over 70 people who are going to get to us specifically for this link. You'll always have a big uplift in you know, to get everyone wants to listen to your wise words, and it's not something that we're always, as I said earlier, that we're so fluent in. It can be sort of a difficult conversation, but you just make it seem so much more common sense. I really love and appreciate everything that you do in your human aura as well as for our industry. So thank you, Mr. Gamble, for your time this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kel, and thank you to everyone that joined and everyone that watches it online.
We move on to next week's speaker, which will be Christina Bruce from Sellabilities. Christina spoke at our PowerPrint session last year, taught us all a very simple thing to stop focusing on specifications and start focusing on customer solutions in our sales dialogue. I can't tell you how many people have quoted back the that example she gave to us about when she tried to get a job quoted through our industry, and nobody asked her what she was actually doing with these training books. It gave us all a little bit of an eye-opener, and she's going to continue that journey with us. The focus from selling is actually selling with leadership and empowering our sales teams next week, so not one that we want to miss. I look forward to that. She's also another human superstar that I'm really enjoying working with, very passionate and highly intelligent. So she'll be talking about that next week. Another quick shout out to Rico and Media Super. Couldn't be here without you guys, and appreciate the support. Behind all of this is a team that run around and make all this happen. And while we sit there and like swans puddling through slight technical difficulties, they're running around in the back end. And London, Luke, Phil and the team this morning, I do thank you for getting us up and running and going live to air under some pretty tricky circumstances. So thank you to everyone out there. The mantra is clear: health is health. Physical and mental health require equal priority. Read back, watch, listen, there is support. I just want to shout out about Lifeline again, 131114. If anything today has made you just have a few different things that you'd rather reach out to Lifeline. They're such a great team as well. And of course, Steve, myself and anyone else around that you think can help out, we're here and offer that to you. Otherwise, have a great day, everybody. And thanks again, Mr. Gamble. Cheers.